This is Quantitative Techniques in Management, MAN-811, Study Session 3, Steps in an Operations Research Study. The expected duration of this study session is 1 week. Introduction. When a problem arises in an organization and it has been decided to adopt quantitative techniques or operations research to solve the problem, when a problem arises in an organization and it has been decided to adopt quantitative techniques or operations research to solve the problem, there are 7 steps undertaken. The 7 steps discussed in the previous session are undertaken. Remember that ideally, every quantitative technique study involves a group of scientists drawn from various disciplines. These steps are the focus of this unit as well as issues bordering on problem solving. When you have studied this unit, you should be able to ascertain the steps involved in the practical application of quantitative techniques, also known as operations research. Appreciate the importance of proper problem definition in the decision-making process. Identify the steps involved in model formulation, validation, and implementation. And finally, examine the role that models play in the decision-making process. Problem recognition and definition. A low sales problem which surfaces in the marketing section of an organization may be caused by a problem in the production section which has led to substandard or low quality goods being produced. If the problem is defined simply as a low sales problem, the marketing department might try such solutions as price reduction and increased promotion. These will not solve the problem as long as substandard goods are being produced. The tendency to define a problem either too broadly, thereby creating confusion and overcomplicating the analysis and the solution, or too narrowly, limiting the impact or likelihood of success of the problem situation should be avoided. The problem recognition and definition step, which is the first in the quantitative analysis process, is a very critical step. This is because every other step in the process is geared towards solving the problem as defined in this stage. Obviously, if the true nature of the problem is not correctly recognized and precisely defined, the whole process will be a futile exercise. This step requires creativity and teamwork. It requires creativity because it will take a very active imagination to be able to transform a rather general problem description into a well-defined problem that can be approached quantitatively. It requires teamwork because sometimes it happens that a problem that initially surfaced in one section of the organization may be an indication of more serious problems in another section of the organization. It then requires a broad spectrum of experts in the different sections of the organization to ensure that the actual problem is defined and is identified and defined properly. Figure 3.1 in the study manual outlines the steps in an operations research study. Extraction of essential variables. When the first step is successfully completed, the next step is the extraction stage. At this stage, all the relevant factors affecting the problem are extracted, preparatory to building a model. Given any real-life problem facing an organization, there will be so many variables affecting the problem, and it will never be possible to build all of them into the decision model. It is in this stage that all those variables that are critical to the decision or those that influence the problem in a decisive way are extracted. Great care should be exercised while extracting the relevant variables. Omitting a relevant variable in this stage is as disastrous as including an irrelevant variable. Supposing the problem facing an organization has been appropriately defined to be low profit, the variables that will be considered to be relevant are: 1. The selling price of the product. 2. The quantity of goods sold. 3. The fixed and variable costs. And 4. The corporate tax. Such variables as pilferage, obsolescence, and spoilage, which could equally affect the total profit, through the total cost could be left out if it is known that their influence is not significant. It is left to the decision maker to decide what is significant and what is not. Let us take a question. What role do models play in problem formulation? Answer. Models enable decision makers to gain an insight into the problem. They help decision makers to assess the outcome of various decision alternatives without having to pay the cost associated with a wrong decision. Construction of model. With the problem accurately defined and the relevant variables extracted, the next step in the process is to construct a model that will enable us to study and predict the behavior of the firm's total profit. Earlier on, we had defined a model as a simplified representation of an empirical real-life condition. In developing a model, therefore, we are trying to establish a relationship among the relevant variables in such a way that when they are manipulated, their behavior will as much as possible reflect the behavior of the real-life situation. For our problem, which has to do with profit, in building a model, we are seeking to establish the precise nature of the relationship existing among the relevant variables already extracted. We proceed as follows. It is known that net profit is the difference between total revenue and total cost, that is, NP equals TR minus TC, equation 1. The total revenue is the product of the unit selling price and the total quantity sold. If we use P to represent price and Q to represent quantity, then TR equals PQ, equation 2. Furthermore, total cost is the sum of total fixed cost and total variable costs. That is, TC equals TFC plus TVC, equation 3. Whereas total fixed cost is fixed, total fixed cost is fixed, total variable cost is the product of unit variable cost and total quantity sold. If letter B denotes unit variable cost and letter A denotes the total fixed cost, that is TFC, then TC, total cost, equals A plus BQ, equation 4. Now, substituting equations 2 and 4 in equation 1, we will have NPBT equals PQ minus bracket A plus BQ, equation 5, where NPBT equals net profit before tax. To complete the model, we need to incorporate the tax effect. Let K denote the corporate tax rate. To incorporate the tax effect, we multiply NPBT by 1 minus K. The net profit after tax will then be NP equals bracket PQ minus bracket A plus BQ close bracket, close bigger bracket, bracket 1 minus K bracket close. Again, NP equals parenthesis PQ minus small parenthesis. Again, NP equals parenthesis open PQ minus bracket open A plus BQ bracket close parenthesis close bracket open 1 minus K bracket close. This then is the tentative model for our problem. It is tentative because before it is adopted, it has to be validated. Data collection and model validation. Having gone through the model formulation stage, the next crucial stage which you should know is the data collection and model validation stage. The data collection stage, which is next, is geared towards collecting a type of data that will help in testing the validity of the model. Specifically, we are seeking for the values of the uncontrollable variables fixed cost, A, variable cost per unit B, and tax K. Supposing the data collection exercise generated the following values for our uncontrollable values. Q equals 50,000 naira, B equals 5 naira, and K equals 25%. You are now ready for the validation stage. This stage is geared towards determining whether the model we have designed predicts our problem or variable of interest or profit to an acceptable level of accuracy. A model that does not reflect the real-life problem cannot predict the behavior of that problem well. How do we determine the validity of a model? One common approach is to apply the model to a text problem that has a known outcome. For instance, if the firm knows that when it produced and marketed 20,000 units at the rate of 20 naira per unit, the net profit was Z, the firm can substitute these values in the model to know the profit value it will yield. So NP in this case equals parenthesis open, bracket open, PQ minus bracket open A plus BQ, bracket close, parenthesis close, bracket open 1 minus K, bracket close. In this context, it would mean 20 into bracket 20,000 minus 50,000 plus 5 into bracket 20,000, all into bracket 1 minus 25. The answer is 400,000 minus 150,000, all into bracket minus 75, which is then equal to 250,000 times 0.75. NP is equal to 185,500 naira. If the figure derived comes close enough to the actual figure in books of the firm, that is Z, the model is deemed to be valid and is adopted. Otherwise, it will be modified. There are a number of reasons that could lead to a model not being valid. One reason is that it could be that either a relevant variable was omitted or an irrelevant variable was added to the model. Another reason could be that values of the variables used in the model are wrong. Also, if the mathematical equations representing a model do not reflect the true nature of the relationship existing between or among the variables, then the model will be invalid. Sometimes it is necessary to specify the range of validity of a model, that is, the range of values of the variable of interest within which the model is expected to give an acceptable prediction. Let us therefore consider the model developed above. The model will be valid for values within the range of the present capacity of the firm. As soon as the capacity is altered, the model becomes invalid because the fixed cost of the firm, which is deemed to be a constant, will change. Also, if, for instance, a model that is supposed to predict the sales of a firm suddenly starts giving negative values, it will be obvious that the model has broken down. The range of validity of a model is the range of values within which it could accurately predict the variable of interest. Box 3.1. Steps in decision making. The steps involved in an actual application of quantitative techniques in solving problems or making decisions are as follows. 1. Problem recognition and definition. 2. Extraction of essential variables from the real-life situation. 3. Constructing a model for the problem. 3. Construction of a model for the problem. 4. Validation of model. 5. Drawing conclusions about the model. And 6. Implementation. Implementation. When appropriate modification steps are taken if necessary, then the model is adopted. An adopted model needs to be maintained and reviewed. This is because of the dynamic nature of the environment in which organizations operate. The values of the decision variables in the model can change at any time. Some relevant variables may become irrelevant, while some irrelevant variables may become irrelevant. When any of these happens, Appropriate modifications should be made in the model to ensure that it remains valid. You can see more on operations research from the link www.yourarticlelibrary.com/ergonomics/operation research/top 6 steps involved in operation research explained/34688. Let us now summarize this session. In this session, you have learned that 1. It is very important that the problem is properly recognized and defined at the beginning, because all the subsequent steps in the decision-making process derive from the definition of the problem. Consequently, if the problem is wrongly defined, every other step in the process will be wrong. 2. Model formulation involves 3 very important steps, namely extraction of essential variables from the real-life problem. And 3. Models play a very important role in decision-making because they enable decision makers to gain an insight into the problem and also to assess the outcome of various decision alternatives without having to pay the cost associated with a wrong decision. Self-assessment questions. Congratulations on your successful completion of this study session. To ascertain how well you have completed the learning outcomes, provide answers to the following self-assessment exercises. Question 1. What are the steps involved in the practical application of quantitative techniques, also known as operations research? Question 2. Why is it very important to define a problem properly and in specific terms in the decision-making process? Question 3. What are the steps involved in model formulation? You have come to the end of study session 3.